Let's talk about where we are and where we're going with Dr. Susanna Hills, an ear, nose, and throat surgeon at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in New York. She's back up late with me on the Final Five. Good to see you again, Dr. Hills.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So we know that New York was really the epicenter where you are for the COVID crisis, and it seemed to come in fits and starts where you saw cases early on skyrocket, then there was a dip, then we all saw this other wave in January. What are you seeing right now on the ground in New York?
Well, for me personally, I've really noticed in the last, I'd say 3 weeks, that my cases of patients who have needed care in the hospital has decreased dramatically. I catch the lagging end of patients because I take care of the patients that needed special surgery for being on a ventilator. So for me, it's the people who are really, really sick who've been in the hospital for a long time. But now even those patients, the sickest ones, have been leaving the hospital, and our volume across the city of inpatients who are really, really sick has just dropped dramatically. So it's great news.
Yeah, and it seems too, as mentioned, Memorial Day weekend, a lot of people are sort of back to their old routines after what was a very strange year for so many of us, more so for those of you in the medical profession. You know, it still feels a little surreal to go out and go through the grocery store and, okay, I'm vaccinated, I don't need my mask anymore. But I get it. You know, I get the idea that we're sort of very carefully getting back to this normal. I would assume the vaccination effort is really top of mind here. Why we're seeing this huge drop.
Yeah, I would say it's probably the single most important factor. It's funny that you mentioned that. I feel the same way. It feels awkward to be going out without a mask.
Right.
And looking around, you know, I'm so impressed with just how conscientious people in New York have been. I still think, you know, the majority, over half of people that I see just walking on the sidewalk are still wearing a mask. And in New York, 47% of people are now fully vaccinated. So that's great that people are getting vaccinated. Great that people are still aware and being concerned for those who aren't yet vaccinated. So I am curious to see. I think the vaccination rate, yeah, that's the single most impactful thing that's happened to make this shift happen. But we're also in the summer. And if you look at the case numbers now, you know, about 800 new cases or so a day in New York City. That's about where we were in August, September of last year, at the end of the summer months. So we're about where we were last summer, but we'll see what happens. Hopefully the numbers continue to just keep dropping.
Yeah. What's the next frontier? Is it a matter of expanding the vaccination effort to kids? I know right now there's now the push to get 12 to 17-year-olds vaccinated. I have friends who have kids, and they were comfortable about that. I know there were other people who were still skeptical about that, getting kids in. Is that what our next big hurdle is to clear?
I believe so. And I think that's going to be the most important next step. Right now, we have to be preparing for the fall. So getting as many kids who are eligible vaccinated now will just make school reopening in the fall safer for everybody. In New York City and other states are going to follow this too. Schools are really only having an in-person option. There's not going to be here that same virtual option that we had last year. So kids are going to be expected to be back in school. We want kids and teachers and parents to all feel safe. So we're really making the push to get as many kids vaccinated as possible. And my message to families when they're thinking about this is to think not only about how the vaccine is protecting their child and their family, but to think about how it also protects their school community and those people who might have health factors that make them prone to severe complications with COVID, or people who aren't eligible for a vaccine because they have underlying medical conditions. So they're not only protecting their own child, but they're protecting the school community that takes care of their kid every day.
And I think that's something very important that you mentioned there, that while many of us, if you're walking down the street and you know, you don't have a mask on, other people don't, maybe some people do, not everybody can walk right in and get that vaccine for one reason or another. But if you want it, if you need the vaccine and you haven't done so already, it seems like it's pretty easy to do at this point.
We have appointments available every day. Many of them, yes, it is really accessible pretty much to anybody who is eligible at this point.
Yeah.
In New York, anyway. I know there are challenges with reaching some communities. Certainly nationally, there are areas of the country and areas within every city and every state where getting vaccines to people is a little more difficult. But here in New York, pretty much everybody who needs a vaccine has access at this point.
I was
if they're over 12.
Yeah, right. I was at Costco over the weekend, and I feel like at this point the vaccine is about as readily available as the samples at Costco, which is not a bad place to be right now because the samples are coming back too. So all of that. Dr. Susannah Hills, thank you again for your perspective on this, and thank you for what you're doing on the ground there in New York.
Hey, thanks, Jim. I appreciate it.
Final Five back after this.